All right, let's talk about one of the most important moments in the history of computing. And it didn't happen in some big, fancy lab. It happened inside the video game consoles that people had in their living rooms back in the 70s. This is the story of how gaming actually learned how to think.
So, to get started, I want you to just imagine something for a second. Imagine your phone could only run one single app. Not one at a time. I mean, just one app, total, forever. No new downloads, no updates, just that one thing. Kind of useless, right?
Well, believe it or not, that's exactly what it was like for the very first home video games. When you bought a console, you were buying a machine that was built from the ground up to play one and only one game. The game and the hardware were basically the same thing.
So yeah, let's dig into that first model, the one game machine. And we're going to see pretty quickly the huge business-breaking problem that came with making things so permanent.
Okay, so what was the actual difference here on a technical level? Well, in those first consoles, every rule of the game, every single possible movement was physically burned into the circuits. They used these custom chips called ASICs. The hardware was the software. There was no separation. And you can probably guess why this model just couldn't last. I mean, for the companies making them, designing and building a whole new piece of hardware for every single game was just insanely expensive and took forever. And for you, the person playing, well, once you got tired of Pong, that console was pretty much just a fancy doorstop. But then, the revolution happened. Something had to change to make this whole idea more flexible. And that brings us to the introduction of a reprogrammable core, the real brains of the operation that would change absolutely everything. And the solution? It was the arrival of the low-cost microprocessor. See, unlike those old custom circuits that could only do one job, a microprocessor is a general-purpose tool. It's not built to do just one thing. Instead, you can feed it a list of instructions, a program, and it just does what it's told. It could be told to play Pong, sure, but it could also be told to play Space Invaders or Pac-Man or anything else you could dream up. And this is the moment, right here in November 1976, when everything changed. The Fairchild Channel F came out. Now, it's not the most famous console ever, not by a long shot, but it was the very first one to have a CPU, a microprocessor, right at its core. And that, my friends, is the official start of the second generation of gaming. Okay, so if the microprocessor is the new brain, well, a brain needs instructions, right? And those instructions came in this totally revolutionary new package, the video game cartridge. This was, quite literally, software in a box. This quote from a classic computer science book really just nails the whole concept. A game cartridge was basically just a little circuit board with some read-only memory chips, ROM chips on it, and those chips held the entire program. So plugging in a new cartridge wasn't just changing the game, you were fundamentally changing the instructions you were giving to the console's brain. So the whole process just got flipped on its head. You pop in a cartridge, the microprocessor inside the console reaches out, reads the program off those ROM chips, and then it just starts executing the instructions one after the other. This separation is a huge concept in computer science called abstraction. The console hardware was now just a platform, and the software, the game itself, was running on top of it. But listen, this massive leap forward was not easy. In fact, it created a whole new set of really, really tough challenges for programmers. And the biggest one? Memory. These early systems had an almost hilariously small amount of it. Seriously, get ready for this number. The legendary Atari 2600, the console that defined an entire era, had only 128 bytes of RAM on board. Not kilobytes, not megabytes, bytes. 128. That's less space than it takes to store a single tweet. The programmers who worked on these things had to be absolute geniuses of efficiency. So this radical new idea, separating the machine from the instructions, it had these huge lasting effects. Because of those insane limitations, the actual code became everything. This was the moment that code truly became kin, and it really marks the dawn of the software industry as we know it today. And the fallout from this was huge. It was immediate. All of a sudden, one single console could play a library of games that was basically infinite. This created a brand new market where software could be made and sold totally separately from the console hardware. And that's what gave birth to the entire industry of third-party game developers. Of course, this software gold rush had a dark side. The market got completely flooded with games, and a lot of them were terrible. people stopped trusting that they were buying something good. The whole thing led to the infamous video game crash of 1983. But even though the market completely tanked, the architectural idea it was built on, that was here to stay. So, why are we talking about this ancient history? What does it all matter? Well, it matters because the change that happened inside these old game consoles is the fundamental blueprint for almost every piece of technology we use every single day. And that is the big takeaway here. This separation of general-purpose hardware from the software that tells it what to do, that is the core principle behind your laptop, your phone, its operating system, the app store you download from. All of it works because of this idea pioneered inside these early game consoles. Which kind of leaves us with one final thought. If you think about it, the game cartridge was really the world's first app store, a way to get new software onto your hardware platform. So the question is, what's next? What's the next big thing that's going to completely change how we interact with the hardware we carry around every day?